Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu salam Rasulullah. We continue reading from Imam Al-Ghazali's The 99 Beautiful Names of God, Al-Maqsad Al-Asna fi Sharh Asma Allah Al-Husna, translated by David Borel and Nazih Zahir. We have reached number 43 on page 113, Al-Karim, the Generous, Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Imam Al-Ghazali said, Al-Karim, translated as the Generous, is one who forgives if he has the power, follows through when he promises, and exceeds the limits one could hope for when he gives. Nor is he concerned how much he gives or to whom he gives. If a need is brought before someone else, he is unhappy. If he is treated badly, he reproves but does not pursue it. Whoever seeks refuge and support with him is not lost, and one may dispense with entreaties and mediators. Now the one who unites all this is in himself, without affection, is the absolutely generous one, and that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It belongs to God alone. May He be praised and exalted. Extremely beautiful traits. Whatever is open for the human being, and because Imam Ghazali says that in the council, in the Tanbih, man may endeavor to acquire these qualities, so they are achievable, but only in some things and with a sort of affectation. And elsewhere, Imam Al-Ghazali, probably also in the hadith, you would start with something on the level of affectation, but then it becomes as if it's a second nature, as we say. In this way, he may be characterized as generous, yet remains deficient by comparison with the absolutely generous, of course. Needless to say, if he is generous because he has been enabled to be so, it's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't talk about generous everybody, that's probably too much, but it's many people recognize the story of Hatim al-Ta'i, a pre-Islamic, very generous Arab, who we have two stories of Hatim al-Ta'i. In one of them, he did literally slaughter. He slaughtered his own horse, the only thing that he had to feed his guest. There was nothing else. So he slaughtered the horse. And it's considered like the utmost generosity. There is another version of his story, but it's still, it reflects generosity. A woman with children came to him in the middle of the night, and she told him that her kids were hungry, and she wanted him to feed her kids. So he awakened his family, his tribe, and he started slaughtering his cattle to feed people, like he did awake people to eat. And it doesn't mean that it's either or. Now talk about these two stories. It could be that, literally the story of the horse could have taken place after the first story. Allahu Alam. But the idea, and the Prophet ﷺ met with his daughter, and the Prophet ﷺ was generous to her because her father was generous. So she and her brother, they became Muslims, and her brother also became known also as generous. So generosity is something that not only it could be acquired, people should strive their best. It should not be for the sake of being mentioned. Hadmat Ta'i, whom we have just mentioned, he wanted people to mention him. Literally, he said he wants people to mention him as a generous person. But one should strive to make his action dedicated for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ikhlas, sincerity. إنما الأعمال بالنيات. Verily, actions are weighed, considered, evaluated according to intention. The hadith. And there are verses in the Quran that address the very first part, that if you are, I'm talking now about the human being, if you are able, you would forgive. And I've seen it in people who did forgive when they didn't have to. They forgave their own personal right, if you will, financial rights, etc., or more than that. And if and the generous would fulfill the promise, no matter what. And if he asked for something, he would give more. And to this, the next part, وَلِبَالِ كَمْ أَعْطَى وَلِمَنْ أَعْطَى. I'm talking about human beings. Imam Shafi'i, for example. Imam Al-Ghazali mentions that Imam Shafi'i, on the outskirts of Mecca, it seems he erected a tent. People erected a tent for him, and he had 10,000 dinars, it seems, and he distributed all that before the evening, and he used to give 2 hands full, like he would simply fill his 2 hands and give people without really counting. And ultimately, the absolutely generous is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot basically, but this is something, it's a beautiful trait for a human being to acquire. So the counsel, many may endeavor to acquire these qualities, but only in some things and with a sort of affectation. In this way, he may be characterized as generous, yet he remains deficient by comparison with the absolutely generous, subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can he not be so characterized when the Messenger of God, may God's mercy and peace be upon him, said, "Do not call the grapevine generous. It is the Muslim who is generous. لا تقول شجرة العنب الكرم فإن الكرم هو الرجل المسلم." Okay. I would like people to know that people in the Arab world, they still call the grapevine trees karm. They use it for in the plural also kurum. So it is a widespread in Palestine. It is widely spread, but there's prohibition here. And first of all, we'll speak about the text of the hadith, and then about the meaning, why this prohibition. In the version of the hadith, لا تسموا العنب الكرم, do not say here in Imam Ghazali, do not call لا تسموا العنب الكرم فإن الكرم المسلم, without هو الرجل. That's it's متفق عليه by both Bukhari and Muslim. Uh, in another version, فإنما الكرم قلب المؤمن. Verily, the generous is the heart of the believer. Why this? Because it seems that it has been associated with like grapes, grape juice, wine. People get drunk, then they act generously, and they attribute this generosity to the wine. And the Prophet ﷺ wanted to undo this relationship between grapevines and this generosity which is associated with getting drunk. This is really the context for this, because the rest of it here Imam Al-Ghazali continues by saying, now it is said that the grapevine is described as generous because it is a compliant shrub with delicious fruit that is easy to pick within reach and free from thorns and other causes of harm, unlike the date palm. The date palm, the branches do have it depends. Some kinds are very thorny, and the palm oil trees, oh, they are very thorny, extremely. I mean, people who work in this field, they pick them up with steel spikes, iron spikes. Al-Raqib, number 44. The all-observant is one who knows and protects, for whoever cares for something to the point of never forgetting it, and observes it with a constant and persistent gaze, so that if one to whom it was forbidden knew about the surveillance, he would not approach it. Such a one is called observant. It is as though this name refers to knowledge and protection together, but with regard to its being constant and persistent, in addition to there being something forbidden and protected from access. In the Quran, a very beautiful. Well, the context is about Jesus Christ, peace upon him. The context is that whether Jesus Christ, peace upon him, told people to take him, to consider him, to believe in him and his mother as gods, and he, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, and he would not really ask him, but the idea is sending a message about the divinity of Jesus Christ, that it's not, that he's a human being, a sign from God, a miraculous birth, no father in the picture, no Joseph. There's Joseph in the story of son of Jacob, but there's no Joseph in the life of Mary in the Quran, a devout woman, a pure woman, literally a pure woman that God chose her. Then Jesus Christ responded him. It does respond. ما قلت لهم إلا ما أمرتني به. I told people only what you have commanded me to. Believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. نعبد الله ربي وربكم. And this is, in fact, in the Quran you will find almost all prophets, and probably all prophets. We know that this is really the case. I'm talking about the narrative itself in the Quran. All prophets call for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the text itself there in the Quran, the prophets one after the other, أن اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره, أن اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره. Then Jesus Christ continues by saying وكنت عليهم شهيدا ما دمت فيهم فلما توفيتني كنت أنت الرقيب عليهم. And this is why I'm mentioning this particular verse, الرقيب. So as long as Jesus Christ was with his community, he was a witness. But thereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the raqib, the observant, the watchful, the وأنت على كل شيء شهيد. You are witness for everything, which only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of being that. Omniscient, all-knowing, and nothing could escape his knowledge subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is really al-Raqib. Counsel. The attribute of watchfulness is only praiseworthy in man if his watchfulness is directed to his Lord and his heart. And that will be the case when he knows that God, the Most High, observes him and sees him in every situation, as well as knowing that his own soul is an enemy to him, and that Satan is his enemy. The absolute animosity is with Satan. With people, they could change course, no matter how bad the situation is. Just think about Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, for example. رضي الله عنه. Saifullah al-Maslul. He was a military leader as a non-believer, as a polytheist, and basically he was the reason why Muslims lost the Battle of Badr in the vicinity. This is on the Battle of Uhud. This is in the vicinity of Medina. The Mount Uhud is a high and long mountain. You cannot escape. You can see it almost from anywhere, and as long as buildings are not blocking your view. So on your way to the airport, from the airport, you would see it. So Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu, he circled the Muslims in Uhud, and he was the reason they lost the war, and he became Muslim. SubhanAllah. Then he became the military commander. There is an American professor of history who mentioned that Khalid bin Walid is one of 3 of the three greatest military leaders in the history of humanity. So it's possible for people to change course from animosity to friendship to Islam, not Satan. That animosity is absolute. And that both of them take the opportunity to prompt him to forgetfulness, his soul and Satan, and disobedience. So he becomes wary with regard to both of them by noticing their abode, their deceptions, and the occasions of their eruption, so that he can block both of them from using the entrances and the exits to his heart. That is his watchfulness. Al-Mujib, number 45. The answerer of prayers is the one who responds to the requests of those who ask by assisting them, to the call of those who call upon him by answering them, and responds to the plight of the poor with all they need. Instead of saying poor, probably, of course, if we read the Arabic, فإنه يعلم حاجة المحتاجين قبل سؤالهم وقد علمها في الأزل. He knows the needs of the needy before they even ask. And that really, the poor, listen to, maybe these are only two lines. هو الذي يقابل مسألة السائلين بالإسعاف. First of all, مسألة السائلين, those who make requests, ودعاء الداعين, and responds to the calls, the prayers, the supplications, and responds to the plight of the poor, وضرورة المضطرين بالكفاية. المضطرين, okay. أما يجيب. This is really, because the مضطر, لمضطر أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. المضطر, someone who is in a situation where there is no course of action that one can do in a state of urgency. It doesn't have to be poverty. It could be one of them. مضطر. For example, the Prophet Jonah, in the belly of the whale, he was in that kind of اضطرار, and he, of course, here we have, he calls on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he asks, he requests, he made a dua, لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. in the darkness of the belly of the whale. And all this was known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in eternity. So it should be known that it's not, and had we used poor in Arabic, the equivalent, of course, it'll be okay to use it. It's not there in the Arabic text. الفقراء, because الفقير أنتم الفقراء إلى الله. Every human being is faqir, including Bill Gates. He's in a state of faqr. Elon Musk is in a state of faqr. Warren Buffett, he's in a state of faqr. All humanity, every single one is in a state of faqr. Because faqr, really, you are, as a human being, you are in a state of need always. You have lots of money, but you cannot really swallow your food. You have lots of money, you cannot breathe on your own. You have lots of money, and you have you became terminally ill. I know about one. I know about a millionaire, a non-Muslim. Doesn't make much difference, really. He's also poor. He's a millionaire, and he is poor in the sense that we spoke about, the faqir. He sought treatment in the United States, and the cancer kept returning and spreading. And he went to a hospital overseas. He left the United States, and they told him, a hospital where there's advanced treatment of cancer, and the hospital, they told him for his cancer they need a machine that is worth $1 million. He donated that immediately. So he has the money, but he's very poor, faqir. An asylum seeker, faqir. People who are so this state of faqir, like exemplified by the state of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam when he was in Madian, with no food, no shelter, no family, no job, doesn't know anyone. Name it, he doesn't have it, except that he had one thing. He resorted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And despite the fact that he was a stranger, he still did a good deed. He performed a good deed. Then he resorted to the shadow, to the shade to the shade, really, al-dhil. The Quran doesn't mention shade of what. It could be shade of a tree, of a wall, whatever. And he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khairin faqir. Yeah, I'm in that state of poverty. Whatever you send my way, I am in need of that. I am faqir. And people introduce themselves. There are Sufis who would introduce themselves al-faqir, but they are not only the Sufis. Okay. Al-faqir. Indeed, he already knew them in eternity, so he arranged the sources sufficient to their needs by creating food and nourishment, and by facilitating both the causes and means of fulfilling all these needs. counsel, man needs to be responsive first of all to his Lord in whatever he commands or forbids him to do, and whatever he assigns to him or summons him to do, then to his servants in whatever God, great and glorious, bestowed on him by way of enabling him to do it, and in assisting every beggar in whatever they ask him, if he is able to do it, or with the kind response if he is unable to do so. I think the use of the word beggar is not appropriate here. That's not because وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ, therefore the beggar drive not away. While the messenger of God, may God's blessing and peace be upon him, said, if I'm invited, okay, before we reach this, because السائل is it a beggar? Okay, because the word beggar is the connotations of a beggar might be people who ask for something. Okay, they might ask for to lend them a book, and usually people who have books they might not really they might not want to lend books. It's difficult, probably. They might ask you for a ride. Okay, I mean, so people, when they ask you, as I said, it's not okay. وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. When the Prophet ﷺ said, if I am invited to eat a sheep's trotter, basically, I think it's the shank, really. It's the okay. It's the shank. It's below the knee is the Arabic word kira. Okay, and that's not much. Everybody knows that that's not much. Practically, there is almost nothing there to eat. If you talk about a goat shank, there's nothing. But the Prophet ﷺ said that if I'm invited to eat a sheep's shank, I will comply. And if a shank is presented to me, I will accept it. Here translated as a sheep's trotter. And Dhira, that's the whole arm, if you will. The idea is that the Prophet ﷺ would accept the invitation no matter how small. He would not break the heart of anyone. And this really would confirm the idea that it's not you respond positively as a mujib. So as human beings, to fulfill the invitation of the person who invites you is important, as long as it's feasible. Also, there are those who are in a position in the society where they know thousands upon thousands of people. They cannot respond to all these invitations. I know that they cannot. We would love to host them, would love to be with them, spend time with them during these sometimes special occasions, marriage, for example, weddings, and what have you. They cannot be there for every invitation. But the Prophet ﷺ set the example. He said any, and that means any, for an invitation with the even if the invitation is that much, the shank of or the trotter of a goat. It should not be, if you cannot make it to invitation, it should never be because you think of yourself as better than those who invited you. It should never be the case. Furthermore, his presence at invited events and his acceptance of gifts represents the utmost of deference and responsiveness on his part. How many contemptible and proud people deem themselves above accepting every gift and would not deign to be present in response to every invitation, but rather maintain their distinction and greatness without any concern for the feelings of the one extending the invitation, or whether he may be hurt on account of them. But such people have no part in the meaning of this name. So inshallah we'll continue with number 46, Al-Wasi', in the next session. Until then, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.